All right, we're live. Hey guys, welcome to an Indie Spotlight. My name is Michael. I'm one of the co-founders at Wicked Publishing. I'm joined by my fellow co-founder.
How's it going, guys? I'm Matt. I'm the other co-founder.
And today we are joined by artist and design director Mike Toney. Welcome.
What's up, guys?
Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
It is my pleasure.
So, I always like to start off these with first just kind of having you tell us a little bit about yourself, and for those who aren't familiar, maybe a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so my day job, I work as a art director at a digital ad tech agency. I'm basically required to, or my team is required to kind of make design display media for tech companies, like for B2B. And it's a far departure from, illustration, but I've been doing, I went to school for design. I've been doing design for 10 plus years. So something I really love to do, and it's a different aspect of creativity. And then outside of work, as people may know, as I'm an illustrator. So a lot of my basis in illustration is, focusing on kind of the African diaspora, and things that relate back to kind of African folklore and mythology. So that's kind of like really where I take my basis from.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've always thought that was such a really cool influence on your art, that you do a lot of different kind of designs and even commissions, but there's a lot of that influence going into it, even in those commission work, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I do focus on that. I tend to get a lot of people who are asking me for it, and there's a gap for it. So I get a lot of clients who are like, man, I've been looking for someone who kind of specializes in what I do, or they don't see a lot of Black anime characters, so it's hard for them to envision it for their stories. So they're like, hey, I found this guy who specializes this, and I can really visualize the story I'm trying to tell now.
Nice. So you've gotten a lot of clients and we're looking for that kind of work, it sounds like.
Yeah, I do. I mean, and it's funny because it ranges. I have, obviously Black clients that come to me, and they want to be able, they feel now that there's an avenue for them to tell their stories. And then I also have white clients that come to me, or Latino clients that come to me, and they want me to, draw their Black characters, like for them, or design their Black characters for their stories. And, I've found that that's been really great and very open of them, because, it's like they're looking to someone, from that culture to make those characters, but also they're looking for someone who specializes in it, whether it was me or if it was like a, Jorge Jimenez or something like that. But if he drew like a lot of John Stewart Green Lantern, and you're like, I want to go to someone who specializes in it, it's very thoughtful of the creator. So, yeah, I get a lot of people in different walks that kind of, are looking for that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I think that's part of why I was drawn to your art, was kind of seeing those kind of influences, and of course the anime influences. It was a unique style I hadn't really seen much before.
Yeah, I mean it's weird because we're out there, like I follow a lot of great Black illustrators, and some of them focus on anime or have an anime influence style, and yeah, it's just like they don't have necessarily the same level of visibility, and so it's, I don't know, it's weird because like I'm in the mix, so I see it, but if you're not in the mix, then it's really hard to kind of find it. It's this weird conundrum.
And it's maybe that's part of why people really value what you're doing, because you are able to get it visible and seen by those people.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's all for the sake of, it's all because of the sake of those people, who really champion it, who are really like, helping the work grow. And I have a little tagline like in most of my posts where, I try to show appreciation to my followers and say, like, I have some of the best followers, I have the illest followers, and I appreciate them. And if you like the work, can you tag other people and let them know about it? And, you know, not that I get a lot of people that do that, but for the people that do, I mean, at least on 1 or 2 posts, I get 1 or 2 people that will tag other people and say, hey, you might like this. And it's through the effort of them that, you know, our work is able to get that level of exposure.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's great. The having the fans dedicated like that, it must be really nice. You know, so one thing I wanted to talk to you a little about today is, you know, we talked a little bit about how you do commission work and stuff. But you also kind of have a bit of your own indie comic project in the works as well.
Yeah, I'm working on like it's funny. I'm working on like a couple of stories and stuff like
Really?
that. And I think you know, right now I've been like putting a lot of effort into this story called Iku the Keeper, and
Mhm.
it it just the character was developed because I wanted to make a black character that had really dark skin. And normally, you know, they stick between kind of like this like particular skin shade when they do characters of color. And
Mm.
you know, I mean, being someone who considers himself brown but a little bit more dark skinned in my community, um, there are people who are darker than me and they get no visibility. And so when I first designed the character Iku, he had this Himba style kind of braid, and he was originally like a brown character that I've normally done. And I'm like, I want to make him darker. Like if he comes from the continent and he comes from like, even if this is alternate universe where the continent is shaped a lot like Africa, he would be a darker character. You know, he would be a darker skinned individual. And I just, I actually just went to a whole other wheel, like part on the color wheel, and was like, I'm gonna go more into that darkish purplish color because there's a lot of people of color who are like that. No visibility. And when I created him, I just kept looking at him. I kept going back throughout the week and just like, I really want to use this character for something. And just based off of his personality, the story kind of came to me. And it was just and then it just kind of hit me, and I just started writing things down and doing a bunch of different things and going back into drawing, and more characters started to come up in my head. So um, the story of Iku the Keeper is the best way I can describe it. It's kind of like if you combined like the Godfather and kind of Naruto in a sense. So
That's
it's
so awesome, dude.
I mean, so it's so like imagine the Iku character is a lot like Michael Corleone's character, where he is kind of thrust into leadership of this particular gang, and they are like underworld kind of gangs situation. So in this fictional kind of city state, it's broken up into 5 different quadrants, and each of the quadrants are owned by or run by an Omenhene. And the word Omenhene just means like king. It's very similar to like Don or something like that, where someone's a Don or a capo, or like the
Hmm.
daimyo or something like that. But it's
Okay.
just an African word for king. It's just Omenhene. And so each of the Omenhenes over the 4 areas, they convene. But there's the 5th area, which is kind of like the lawless zone, and that's where you find our character, kind of Iku. And you watch his kind of rise into power, into becoming an Omenhene. And the way that kind of happens stirs up unrest amongst the other Omenhenes. So they want to kind of deal with him, but they also need law brought to the lawless zone. There needs to be a 5th Omenhene. So they don't want to just kill this kid in his ascension. They have to find a way to have someone else take his place, while there's order kept. And you kind of learn the whole reason for that, why they want to have, the 5th place have kind of this particular order and, everything else. So it's really about you get a chance to see like the underbelly of these individual zones, run by these individual families. They have their own specialties and things they specialize in that, give them power and stuff like that. And or power and influence. And then kind of where the Naruto aspect comes in is that the focus on the particular abilities and the magic system, and how Iku and all of the main kind of cast and antagonists handle those issues. So yeah, I don't want to go too deep into kind of the power system and everything. I do want some of it to be a surprise, and I do want some of it to kind of look up some of this stuff. But I will
Interesting.
say generally, the type of energy or power or sources that I use in a lot of my artwork or characters is I use this thing called Ashe, and Ashe is just it's the Yoruban form of like chi or life energy, less like chi and more like the force. So Ashe is like the living force that is in everything, and so people who specialize in this particular Yoruban religion, um, they get a specific title, and that title allows them to says that they have the ability to manipulate Ashe in a certain degree where they can make things happen. That's the realistic aspect of the Yoruban religion. So what I've done is I've taken that aspect into my world and I've made it into a particular magic system. So it is known that people can study in this religion. It's like a religion that's in in the country like Christianity or Catholicism, but only certain people who reach a particular level gain that title and these abilities. And so, yeah, there'll be people in the story who have these abilities, and those people who can operate that way are considered special.
Hmm. No, that's
That's
really
awesome.
cool. I love to see that influence carrying over, into that.
Real quick, since I've been following you personally for quite a bit, I noticed over time you were posting a lot of this for the story. But my question is do you plan to have it as in a sense, a manga or a comic, or are you planning on coming out with it animated?
I'm definitely gonna do it as a comic. I have another thing that I'm working on to do for like a little animated shorts and little animated pieces, but I'm gonna try to do this one as a comic and tell that story that way. I think it's gonna really help me flesh out the writing and allow it to be like a portfolio piece. I have had like a screenwriter message me about you know a particular story or whatever, and it hasn't been nailed down yet. I'm very particular about how I want to write the story because some of my favorite writers they are able to seed in this deeper aspect of their story. One of my favorite stories or writers is Yoshihiro Togashi for Hunter x Hunter. And he also did Yu Yu Hakusho, and those are my 1 and 2 favorite series because I love the character development of them, and the abilities play a strong factor in the character development. That's kind of what I want to have. I want my characters to feel real. I want you to like watching Yu Yu Hakusho or Hunter x Hunter might not bring you to tears, like Naruto would, or Haikyuu or something like that. But when you watch it, you're so invested in the characters and their growth, and they feel like they make smart decisions and stuff like that. So I want to really flesh that out with Iku. As far as like doing something animated, I have another story like called Lassiter, and I want to kind of do like an anime opening for it, and maybe a couple little like short animations for it. That's why I've been doing a lot of painted backgrounds and stuff like that. I'm trying to integrate that into my work as practice.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think going the comic route would be really cool. Are you kind of seeing it as a color comic or as a black and white?
I'm seeing it as a black and white. It's because I love mangas for the reason that it's black and white.
Nice.
I mean, I love the contrast. I love how it really takes your focus into the writing. It's like back in the day when you didn't have so much special effects. Like the focus had to be on storytelling, and you get certain details in your artwork, in my opinion, when you only have to focus on your values, right? Your 3 major values. So it's kind of that's kind of my goal. I think I want to have it be black and white, but I guess it'll come down to like my followers and stuff. I know most people follow me because they like my coloring. You know, they like the way I kind of color and light things, and so, you know, they might be expecting for me to tell the story that way, and maybe I'll include a couple pages that may be like that, you know, that I, you know, if it leans to the story.
Have you experimented much yet with manga style illustrations? I haven't seen much of that kind of post, like you were saying. I've seen a lot of color posted images.
Yeah, so it's funny. I have like a secret comic that I was running for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, and so it wasn't, you know, I don't. It's funny. It's like I don't like promote it a lot on my
Huh.
page or and stuff like that. And it's basically used for testing. And it's funny. Whenever I do an interview, I always bring it up, but most people, you know, they never really know about it. But it's actually called Duelist,
Huh.
and it's on Tapas or whatever.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And I think it's like 9 chapters or whatever. And but I haven't updated it in like almost a year, and I want to go back and update it. But I'm, you know, I've been doing a lot of commissions and focusing on kind of that, and so I do want to update it. I do kind of want to finish it if the time permits it, you know, permits itself. Like if a couple things for me change financially, I'll probably go back into it to finish it. But the quick synopsis of the story of Duelist is like you follow these 3 kids and they go to a school, and the school basically teaches them this religion called dualism, right? It focuses on the dualistic this dualistic religion about duality. And so as your first couple years there, your main focus is, you know, getting in touch with that inner self and that inner spirit and stuff like that. And the school also teaches you 3 different disciplines, you know, as you become more proficient or deeper through this kind of religious practice. You can use these 3 different disciplines, you know, to a certain way or degree. And so you follow 3 protagonists or whatever, and the story kind of flips from there. Like you start to figure out what that inner self is, and how it kind of changes or could change like a particular aspect of, you know, humanity.
Hmm.
The one thing I like, it's basically all set. It's all meant for practice and to understand different drawing techniques and understand different manga
Nice.
storytelling techniques. I'm very embarrassed of it because when I started it, I was like very early on in my art journey. But the one thing I'm very proud about is every chapter you go through, there is an improvement on every chapter. So you could, you know, it shows that like I'm really practicing to get better. And
Nice. You kind of see the progression of your style.
yeah, and people comment on it. Like in the comments, they'll say, "Wow, like it's rare that I read a comic where every chapter the artwork gets better and better, you know, per chapter." And I'm very proud of that. So it shows that, you know, I didn't waste my time just kind of drawing just for fun. But you know,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if you can tell, but we are looking at it right now on
I did
Michael's
see that
screen.
pop up.
Yeah, I mean, you can really tell that you have been improving, even just comparing it to your stuff now. You can tell that there is that journey of self improvement with the art. And to be honest, that with a lot of manga artists, you see that a lot versus where, besides indie comics, when it comes to regular published comics, you don't really see so much of that because the artist usually switches to different projects or different stories.
And
Whereas with manga, it's the same. It's usually the same artist, and you get to see that progression over time as they get assistance and how it becomes more professional. But even just by yourself, I can really tell that there's definite like years and years of improvement right there.
yeah, thank you, I appreciate that.
Hmm.
And it's well, you know, it's funny too with like Western kind of comics too, because I do read, um, you know, Western comics. I do like Batman. I do, you know, read some Marvel and stuff like that. My dad used to collect comic books as a kid, and he got us into collecting comic books and reading comics and stuff like that. And the one thing I find, especially with Western comics, is like, you know, like when those guys get hired, they get hired. They get hired at the top level. You know,
Hmm.
like I watched, you know, some of the was it Rob Silva or whatever it is, RB De Silva, or like Jorge Jimenez I brought up, like they're at such a high level, it's hard for me to see them quote unquote getting better. You may see their art change, but like to see it improve would just, I mean, it would, I don't know how they could improve upon that. You know what I mean? Or Capullo, like it's just like hard to see those kind of artists get better because they're at the top of their game. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
a mangaka could start, and like I was saying, it's not so much about the visual per se. You can have a wild visual style like Oda or the people who do. I'm reading this newer comic, Chainsaw Man or
Mhm.
Promise Neverland or whatever. Like you can have a
Mhm.
wild, wonky style like that and get away with publishing it, and then you see over several chapters. If you look at the first chapter of Promise Neverland and the most recent chapter, the dude's art or the artist's art has changed, like in my opinion, drastically. It's gotten more defined. You can tell they're putting more time into it, and yeah, so it's like you do get a chance to see that progression. Whereas like you're not. I don't think you're gonna get hired at DC or Marvel if you're not like at a particular like almost top of your game.
Hmm.
There's no room for that progression to be had at those companies. It seems.
Well, it's kind of hard. Like I like I couldn't if I draw something and then you put my work next to Jorge Jimenez, like it exposes me. You know what I mean? It exposes like my skill level and like where I'm at, as an artist, but also it reflects on the company. So it kind of makes sense that, I think Jim Lee is like an art director over there now. So he's looking at people and as an artist, as a, famous world renowned Batman artist, he's going to be looking at people who are, at that particular level, or they bring us particular like life to their characters, which is also very hard to do. And yeah, I think it's hard. I think you got to be at like a really high level to work there. And that makes sense because you're going to be putting your work next to other people who are at a very, very high level too.
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I could see how that would make it kind of difficult for indie artists to kind of break out into those kind of companies.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what? The internet has allowed indie artists to make their own thing and do their own stuff. And like you could be at any level, or you could be really good. Like you can be really good and not necessarily be like master level or whatever, and tell an amazing story and have good artwork too. Like there's a dude I know, his name's Silverance, and he has this story called Love Sucks for These Losers. And I don't know if I can swear, sorry.
Go play it. No, it's all good. It's all
I
good.
love this series. I love it. I have volume 1.
Really?
The dude's just like awesome. And he included, when he's like doing his volume, in the background, you can see artwork and like how he pays homage to or like shouts his other artist friends out in his work. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like it's awesome that he's drawing that and he's considering like, hey, C Night Comics, which is also another friend of mine, working on a thing. And he's like, that's cool. And he just throws it in a poster of the background of the school or in a bedroom somewhere or something that's happening. And you're just like, man, that's, like that's awesome. And his work is amazing and it's great. And I was able to find out about it because of social media. So the internet and social media has allowed for indie artists to really, really come up and do a lot of miraculous things, man. And so there's not so many gatekeepers anymore. You can launch yourself to a certain point where a company, like, they can't, there's that quote, be so good they can't deny you. It's like that, like Piccolo, for instance. He just
Always underrated. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
yeah. And you see 2 million followers on Instagram, and God knows how many followers on all of his other platforms. And it's like, if he comes to you, if he's doing so, like, he got really big for doing a lot of his DC fan art stuff for Teen Titans, and it's like, how could you not book him for doing that? It's not like he's doing the same like style that DC artists are doing, but he has such a massive following. It would be ridiculous not to give him a shot and see what his storytelling was like.
No, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but it just goes to show you, like you said, how much the industry has changed. That like you kind of the self publishing and kind of self, putting this thing about yourself is kind of the new thing to do, really.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think, what did he just do? He did Icarus on the Sun. He was dropping these pieces of artwork of like this girl who was like a flame and this guy who was like a candle, and like it just caught on with his audience. And he'd been doing it before
Mm,
he got his million followers and stuff like that.
damn.
And he just did a Kickstarter, and in less than a day, he had $500,000. And
Jeez.
so, and that's because of his following. And so, like,
Nice.
realistically, audience dictates power now. That was what the gatekeep a long time ago, when there was only one gate for visibility, for people to be able to see your work and to see everything else. That's what you were vying for. You were fighting to get on the main stage and get on a soapbox, right? To get to 2 million people, to get to 100,000 people. And so, and the funny thing is, that wasn't even 1% of the amount of people who followed him backed him. So, it's like wild. Like, now you don't, you back in the day, you would need a DC. You would need an image, or well, Dark Horse and Image were kind of small, but you would need a really big name to move numbers like that.
Mm-hmm.
And now you don't necessarily need that if you build the audience on your own. And a lot of
Wow.
companies look for people who do that, and they'll try to hire
Hmm.
them because they're like, you've done most of the work for us already.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's social media and the like has just changed all that. It's kind of amazing to think about that. And it makes me want to ask you: have you ever considered doing like a crowdfunding campaign of any kind?
I have, I have, I have, I, so I used to own a clothing company before, I moved to New York and started working as an art director, and that company was valued, at like $2.2 million. It was like, I did it while I was doing it while I was in college, and we had made a really good run. And what it really, messed us up was the Boston bombing. And me and my business partner wanted to reevaluate what we were doing, and how long we wanted to do this, because the goal for us was acquisition, to build a company that we can basically then sell off.
Hmm.
And we kind of changed ways. So we did do a crowdsource project there. It was our first ever cut and sew products, and it was successful. And it did
Nice.
well. But the one thing I learned about it is, like, when you do the project, you want to make sure first project you do is really well. So you don't want to have to come back to the people all the time, but you also want to develop an audience and a particular level of connections to certain media outlets, or whatever it is that can really help you kind of boost what you're doing. So I want to do a crowdsource thing, but when I do it, I want to, like, bring a really good product. The first thing I was thinking of is doing my art book, which is like Black anime, Lost Children of the Diaspora.
I
And
think that's awesome. Yeah.
but what I was gonna do is, I already have the book done. I just need it edited. And I was gonna actually just release it as a digital download first, and just see the response for it as a digital download, and how many people would kind of go for it then. And if it did pretty well, then I would utilize that money to get printed copies, and then do a crowdsource thing. And then everybody who basically bought it digitally, could get a copy, and then I would kind of crowdsource it from there. But yeah, I want to kind of have a product first. I want the first couple of people who you actually order it on the Kickstarter, that you actually can receive it, just a couple of days after Kickstarter is over. So instead of waiting 5 months or 6 months to get the product, if you were part of the first 30 people that backed it, your book's coming in 30 days. There's a lot of things I want to kind of do with that, but I have thought of, crowdfunding and stuff like that. I
Hmm.
just want to make sure it's the right project, and I want that right project to be a stepping stone to more projects.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. You want to make sure that first campaign is really strong, so that you can get more people to come in for those further campaigns down the line.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's if it needs to happen. But I also, if the first campaign is really strong, it really validates you and can really help you, your yourself as a business.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you do you go? I know went to it was let's see, you went to Comic-Con recently, is that right? New York Comic-Con not too long ago.
Anime
So,
NYC.
and what was it now?
Anime NYC.
Oh, really? Okay. So it's
How
a more
was
anime
that?
influenced. Yeah.
Yeah,
How was that?
it was pretty good. I mean, I liked Anime NYC a lot. I went as I had a table that was there in the artist alley, and it was good. It was a really great experience. I loved it. I was exhausted by talking to a lot of people. I was very nervous when I did it because I was one of the only people going there um, that was only showing original artwork, so I didn't sell any fan art. And I also all my characters were black characters. They were all people of color. So it was nerve wracking because I've been to a con before, and I know that realistically, if you want to go there and make any money, you have to go and you have to have fan art. And you also don't want to do something as divisive as you know doing people of color in anime. There are people who are literally just giving me side eyes for no other reason for the fact that my characters were black characters.
Really?
And yeah, because I mean, there's this stigma that like if you try to add color to things, you're making it a race thing. Whereas like I would say the opposite, because when you look at a majority of stuff, it's like people actively try to avoid people of color and their cultures. Like I love anime. I swim in it. I drown in it. It's amazing. And as much anime as I've watched, and I'm talking about thousands upon thousands of episodes, thousands upon, if you just count the big three of anime chapters, you're in the 3,000s of reading. You know what I'm saying? Like these chapters. So, I think Oda's at like 1,000 right now, 1,000 plus. Hajime Ippo is at like 1,000 plus chapters. And you know, they will pull things from all over the world and they like almost actively avoid kind of Africa or, non-stereotypical things of people of color. And, all I'm doing is just kind of like adding to it, but then people feel like, you're doing that to either pander or you're doing that to like bring race into it. And it's more about inclusion. It's more about um it's inclusion is not necessarily the right word. Black people exist in the world. Gay people exist in the world, and they have for thousands of years. It's
And
recorded history. And
sorry to interrupt, but in a sense, it's kind of more to me. It sounds like you just want people to understand that it isn't necessarily you could say the title of them or like even race or sexual orientation, or even just gender identity. It's more about the character themselves, in a sense, is
exactly
what you're trying to get out.
And there also doesn't need to be a narrative for it. Like there's always some type of narrative device why a character is a person of color, why a character is gay, why a character is a non-cisgender or non-binary individual, right? And they like have to do a backstory or something of that nature. And it's kind of like you can just talk about who they are as a person now and how their story progresses now, and it doesn't necessarily need to have some narrative backspin to it, and I think, and I've told people all the time, like, that like I'm having the people of color in there, it kind of enriches everything, you know what I mean? And the fact that like what I'm doing isn't innovative at all, because like it's the same thing that Kishimoto has done, or or any of these great manga that we love. They just pull awesome source material from all over, and then they turn it into a power system, and they tell these stories about it. I'm literally doing the same thing. The only thing that's different is that I'm using African mythology, or I'm using, kind of children of the diaspora kind of, African diaspora kind of lore. And like, that's it, and people get really excited about it. Like, man, you're doing this really new thing. And I'm like, it's really not. It's just like the moment it catches on, I'll be right under I'll be right under the radar. Like, everybody else who's making a ninja comic or ninja manga or a Shinigami, death god kind of story.
No, I totally get you there. Matthew Reese in the chat asks, do you see that as being more of an issue with anime? He says he hasn't seen that much as much in Western comics as described. What do you think about that?
I mean, it is. I think it is an anime a little bit because, you know, um, they're in Japan, even though Japanese people are obviously extraordinarily smart and they're well researched and stuff like that. I think they have a different relationship with people of color than some of the kind of Western countries, which allows us to give Japanese people more of a pass, you know, when they do things like Mr. Popo or, you know, Killer or, you know, any of these weird things that we've, you know, seen in some of the animes or manga or whatever. In Western comics is a little bit more sad because, you know, people of color are here and they see the different diverse aspects of it, and it's almost like they're choosing to look over it. So like every couple of days or when I see a new, you know, something come out that I want to get, I'll go to Midtown Comics and I'll buy it. I won't read on like Comixology or something like that. So I went into Midtown Comics and I'm searching the main racks because I'm gonna get, you know, Last Night on Earth Batman. And I always get something that's indie there. And the last thing I got was I read this series of eugenics and I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal. I mean, I liked it. And I saw another thing called Excellence. But as I'm scanning all of the things, I'm like, I am not seeing any black people really on any of these main covers. And it was just like, I wasn't like disappointed or anything. It's just like par for the course, you know. And I'm looking at the bottom rack and I see this black dude in a hood, and I like the typography first. I didn't even recognize that the character was black. I just like the type as a designer. I was like, man, I really like this type. You know, obviously you can't really read it that well, but I like how it's set up. It's definitely set in the lore of that world. And when I picked it up, it was a comic about this black dude, and everybody in the comic was black, which I didn't expect, except for one person that he was like kind of saving, and just like all of the stuff that was entered. I was like, wow. And this was on the bottom rack. It was from Image Comics. They do a lot of cool indie stuff. And I read it and I was like, wow, I like this. I like the world it's setting up in. It's and stuff like that. But I feel like it is in Western comics a lot, and people complain that there aren't enough new black heroes. But when there are, you know, they don't get the same level of visibility or quality given to them the same way. You know, it takes a big name like Brian Michael Bendis to do, you know, Miles Morales and Riri Williams, you know, and like Riri's start was rocky. And, you know, Miles kind of jumped on the scene. He got a little bit of shit too until things kind of changed for him. But like, you know, there's just not the same amount of energy you can tell placed behind those characters in the Marvel universe and in the DC universe.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think you're right, and I think a lot of people I think a lot of people are seeing that and are having problems with a lot of things that Marvel and DC are doing right now, and along those lines, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. It's hard. I don't know. It's hard because like
It is, yeah.
you see Sam Wilson, you know, Captain America, in the comics, and then like people were, you know, it was a little bit divisive because then people didn't like you know how he kind of had this jive level of speak to him, you know, for some of the people of color who were like reading it and they're like, that's not really authentic. And then there were people who were reading it who are like Captain America fans who were just like, oh, now Captain America has to be black because of this and that, and everybody's trying to balance it out and da 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 da. And you know, it's weird. Like I'm on the vein of I want to see new characters of color, you know, and instead of just trying to put people in those seats because I have a feeling people are gonna throw rocks at them anyway, like diehard like loyalists. And then I also feel like there are so many stories that can be told from that perspective, that you know I think it's, you know, maybe better for us, you know, to have those new characters.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of it comes from is a lot, kind of what you're saying in a sense, with people just being placed in other people's shoes in a sense, because that's how people look at it. they'll look at it more as like, well, that's not the person who I've been reading about for the past 20, 30 years. What's up with that? Why can't this person just be like a sidekick for a bit, or someone who's learning the ropes from this person, but their own separate character who can develop and become like who they want to be in a sense. Like I watched a lot of people talk about Riri Williams saying that the way she was written wasn't necessarily, it didn't seem like she was her own character in a sense. She just seemed as if she was a fill-in for just this time period. Like you see certain heroes take over and then the main hero comes back, but they even admitted that kind of now, since she is becoming more of her own character, a lot of what happened with Miles Morales is starting to happen. That she's starting to develop. Sorry about that. She's starting to develop into her own. You're starting to see her own expression, her own way of dealing with the present battle at hand or the present mystery or anything like that.
Yeah, I think, and I agree there. It's funny because like you're right. Riri Williams is a weird case because she literally was just like copying a lot of Iron Man, and that was really hard to get behind, especially with the issues that people were having already of like making certain characters, like black and that being an issue, right? But then like, it really comes down to though, like, I don't know, Bucky becomes, Captain America. And was there the same amount of uproar when Bucky becomes Captain America? Or Doom becomes the next Iron Man? Is there a problem when there's like superior Iron Man Doom? Now, granted, like those were written really, really well. Or you have, superior Spider-Man. Now, granted, Doc Ock shoots his brain into Parker, and he's living as Parker, but like, you know, we tend to make, when we tend to try to make excuses for that stuff. When it really comes down to is like, I don't want to see my favorite white character now portrayed as a black character. And why don't you give them the new characters? But when they do, or even characters you've been watching for 30 years, when they change that character, you have loyalists to be like, Spider-Man would never do that. Well, Spider-Man's been doing the same thing for 30 years. He has to do something a little bit different. You know what I mean? At some point in time, or there has
That
to
is
be.
true, and I see exactly where you're coming from. To me, I'm just not really the one who would really accept someone just filling in a different shoes. I mean, personally, I didn't really like Riri as kind of taking over as Iron Man, but watching how it's been developing, I'm really starting to like her. And same thing with Miles Morales when it started happening. I'm just now catching up with a lot of Marvel myself, trying to see what a lot of people are talking about and just trying to get my own opinion of things. But
it's something they've been doing in DC forever. It's that idea of legacy. I mean, that's essentially, and it's okay to have the next hero take the mantle. That's not that's
I'm
a good thing.
perfectly okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with people taking over the mantle, but it's what I kind of don't like. What a lot of Western comics were doing for a long time is kind of like let's take the same concept with Batman.
Yeah.
You see a lot of these characters becoming Batman for a moment, and then there's one character who somewhat changes up the order. I think his name's Duke, I believe, and he, instead of having the normal Batman or Robin suit, he kind of created his own suit, and everybody's like, "What's up with that? Why would he do that?" But it's kind of more of he's making his own character in a sense. He sees all these people being the same thing as Batman. And he's like, I don't want to be like that because I don't want to be part of the Batman family, so to speak. I have my own things. So
Yeah,
he creates his own thing, and a lot of people were like, "What?"
and it's
What?
funny. I kind of, you think Duke Thomas, I think, and
The signal, right?
yeah, the signal, yeah. And then for a while they were like, grooming him to be something, and now I don't even know fully what the signal is. I mean, he played his role for kind of Dark Knight's Metal, and like I don't quite know how his ability is going to kind of be used in the future, but he did have his own kind of suit, and they had that We Are Robin run,
Mm-hmm.
a while, and like that's basically where it comes from. That was really cool. Like I like the mantle thing. I personally don't like putting other people in people's shoes. It's the one thing I really love about like mangas and animes, like when a character dies, like they're dead. Like, you know what I mean? And so like I appreciate that. Like, and if
Mm-hmm.
they do come back, they have to come back in a whole different entity. I'm trying to think of characters that die and come back, but like you
The
know,
only real example in anime is Goku. I mean, that's probably the only real example I can think of.
Dragon Ball
Honestly.
Z, Yu Yu Hakusho.
Sure, but Yu Yu Hakusho, even then, he comes back as a ghost, doesn't he? Or I don't
He
think
comes
he's.
back as a ghost, and then he gets brought back to life. But
Yes. Okay.
yeah,
he's given a second chance in a sense.
he's given his second chance, but like,
But
See, I
he's
like
not
that.
the same. He's not the same person, though.
yeah,
That's what I do like about anime is that even as the passing of the mantle, the person who got the mantle is still their own person, and they incorporate who that person was into their own being. Like Naruto is a perfect example of all of that. It's a real clear, perfect example of how to pass the mantle correctly
yeah, I agree.
to a
Like
new generation. How to
when
do it.
Akuma dies and Shikamaru takes over for him, it's like spoiler alert if you haven't seen Naruto
Oh wait,
20 years.
He has to like
I'm
hold.
gonna take my headphones out for the next part. You go ahead and talk for the next 10 seconds.
Uh, yeah, but when you know he takes over for him, like that's meant the way Jiraiya goes, and like everybody having their each stage, like they did a really great job with that, and those people are gone. You know what I'm saying? As far as we know,
Yep.
they're gone. They're not coming back. If they were brought back through the Edo Tensei or whatever, they're brought back as zombies and they were killed, and that was it. Like for the Great War, but like there's a lot of anime that I watch when a character dies, that is it. They do not come back, but they leave a legacy and they leave something in the world that changes the characters that are there. And I find an issue that sometimes happens with Western comics is because those characters are so lucrative that they, letting them go is too hard. So, instead of killing Batman, he gets sent back in time with the Omega beams, like, and you're like, everybody else who's been hit with the Omega beams has died. You know what I mean? But they're like, we can't kill Bruce Wayne, Batman. We haven't built up a character enough to take his place.
That's true.
Yeah, that's one thing I have a problem with. There's no real finality. There's no. It just there's no conclusion in a lot of Western comics.
Yeah, and it's funny because they've done a lot of stuff where the characters could make those things could particularly happen. Like, I mean, you've established a Damian Wayne. You've established that Tim Drake is probably the best detective of all of them and could really take that mantle of Batman, and Batman would be okay with that. Like, there's just, there's certain things that, like, you've established if you wanted to be bold and be like, yo, the Bruce Wayne Batman, you know what I'm saying, is gone. And this is the mantle of, and the cowl has now been passed on. I think the one thing that they're fighting hard to try to get against is passing on the mantle of Batman is hard. You have to create a character who is utterly crazy, but aligns himself on the line of good. Batman is a crazy person. I mean, he's a rich guy who dresses in a bat suit, beats the crap out of people, but he's totally dedicated to justice and himself to the point where he has a contingency for himself. God forbid if something happens with himself. It's crazy. So you have to develop a character who will lose himself in the cowl of Batman, and they have several characters around them that they could ultimately do that. But there's a money fear. If Bruce Wayne goes, how many people will go with him? How many people have been following Batman, since the golden era and silver era of comics? Like, that's going to be scary. That's scary for them. So it's like, we're talking about 50 years of Batman. And people are complaining about One Piece, like, man, is it ever going to end? I'm like, Batman hasn't.
Yeah, no, that's a
One
good
Piece
point.
could just be the Batman formula for them.
Well, I see it as a big difference there, though, because I actually respect. I hate to say it. Well, okay, I'm not gonna say like I don't respect Batman or anything, but I think One Piece is an incredibly written series just because of there's so much progression with the character development there that I don't see happening in Western comics necessarily.
Very true. I mean, I love One Piece. I think Oda is a genius. I think a lot of those writers and creators are geniuses because they do the full. I mean, they're writing and they're drawing their characters and they're doing it weekly, and they're on a particular clock because their comics get voted on too, by the viewers. And the progression of the characters are good too. I think the progression of the characters are good, but the way Western comics. But the problem is like they've accelerated, unfortunately, over so many years to Super Saiyan Goku 5 so many different times to the point where you have to reset timelines, change multiverses, and bringing characters back to square one. But like, you know, there's just something about like, you know, like there's these really great lines in Western comics that I love. This that I find, you know, that's the same in like mangas and stuff. Is like, you know, Batman being lassoed by the lasso of truth, which compels you to tell the truth. And when asked who he is, I'm Batman. Like, how wild is that? Like, he's actually Bruce Wayne, but like his brain is he's now been hardwired by his trauma so much that he is Batman and Bruce Wayne is the persona. Or that the Ghost Rider could give the Punisher the penance stare and nothing happened. Out of all the people that the Punisher's killed, and he'd be like, I regret nothing. That like gives you the chills to see that and be like, that's how hardcore of a badass he is, that the penance stare does nothing to him out of all the people that he's killed because he doesn't feel regret for all of the people that he's killed. And he's killed a ton of people.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, that's like, that's so cool. But then it's like, you know, when you kill him and revive him and you know, there's Crisis on Infinite Earths and then Infinite Crisis where the universe is brought to multiverse and verse is brought down to one Earth and everything else. It's like, man, like this is a lot. A guy, you know, who's a burglar now, it's like, I don't even want to see that. You know, like this all-time thing. Like, yeah, so it's hard. You know, I personally, I prefer, you know, mangas to Western comics just because I like the story. I think the story progressions are more finite. I like the fact that I can get to the end of, you know, Seven Deadly Sins or Naruto or whatever, and that's the end of it. And I have to be like, man, that was amazing. And now I get to either watch this creator make something else or go to a new creator who's created something.
No, yeah, that's cool. I totally get what you mean. I'm a huge fan of Naruto and all those kind of mangaka guys over there.
That's actually why he had to step out for just a quick second because he's not trying to get any spoilers for Naruto.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm watching on. No, it's all good. I'm watching on Toonami, so I'm like way behind on everybody else.
Oh, jeez, like, man! I wish you would have said that. I mean,
no, it's all good. It's all good. No worries, man. But yeah. Speaking of which, you know, you have that a lot of Naruto style art on your page.
Yes.
One of the first things that I caught my eye actually when I first started looking at your work. Are those commission works that you've done?
Yeah, so this commission stuff that I've done for people. I try to stay away from doing a lot of fan art.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you kind of mentioned that a little earlier. You don't really do too much fan art then.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of personal fan art from me. If I do, it's very weird stuff. It's very whatever. Because I mean, like, you know, I draw a lot of people of color, and like, you know, who am I gonna do fan art wise from Naruto? Is I can do the Hidden Cloud, but it's like, you know, do I identify with a lot of those kind of characters? You know, not necessarily. Really, I like the Raikage. I think he was a beast, but there are other characters that I identify with that are not from, you know, the Cloud. The Hidden Cloud. I don't want to talk too much more about that, but you know, who am I gonna do from Bleach? Who am I gonna do from, you know, One Piece? Really, you know, out of the characters that I actually, you know, like from One Piece. If I'm gonna do, you know, people of color as far as fan art, and so there's not a lot. So I've just been committed to making new characters, which, you know, has hurt my growth socially, but you know, for social media, but. I don't mind doing it for character commissions, but yeah, I don't do a lot of fan art. If I do, it's something that's like weird or funny or, you know, really old or something like that, and I kind of try to bring it into my style. But I am heavily influenced by the big three of our generation and a couple of older comics and mangas as well that are massive influences on, you know, the way I want to tell stories and how I draw my characters and I get my influences. Even though the fan art.
Now I wanted to bring this screen share this one. This one I think has become one of your really popular ones as well, which is the what do they call this guy? The Anansi Trapdoor Spider Man. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was. I've gotten a lot of feedback from people about that one.
Yeah, Anansi is an African god of storytelling, and he's actually a trickster as well. So, he asked the gods for his own thing that he can have, and it was his ability to kind of tell stories. But it also makes him like a little bit of a trickster. So a lot of the stories that you read about Anansi, he's tricking people, to get his way or to find something or to kind of do something. So I figured I wanted to make, like, when everybody was doing a Spider Sona, I was like, well, if I make a Spider-Man, why don't I use kind of an African spider folk tale kind of thing and use a character who doesn't have the same physical strength as Spider-Man, but he thinks, at an insane level. So, you have a character who's very smart at setting up traps and setting up different schemes. And, he thinks as fast as his spider sense, essentially. And so, and his webbing is a little bit different. It's able to harden or soften based on how he creates it. So he can use it to create different constructs and do different things with his webbing, which then allows him to kind of, set up his enemies and do different things and stuff. So
That's awesome. Yeah. Now, are you watching American Gods by any chance?
I've seen season 1. I haven't seen anything from season 2. I've been waiting for it to conclude so I can just binge watch
Oh
it.
yeah, okay, yeah. He has a good role in season 2.
Yeah, I mean, I loved his opening part. I mean, on that slave ship, I probably watched that shit like 20 times. And then
Oh yeah, powerful stuff.
yeah, and then I actually did a drawing of Orlando Jones sitting in the chair as a Anansi.
Really?
Yeah, and I did like Mr. Anansi or whatever over
Oh,
his
that's
head.
cool.
And he actually commented on it. And I
Oh
was like,
man.
yo, man, that's awesome,
Oh, that's so cool.
That was really great. He's a down to earth kind of guy, man. So that
Nice.
was really awesome. I got to do another one for him for season 2. But they're
Yeah,
planning
that's a
on,
good
I think,
idea.
doing a spinoff called the Nuncy Boys. So
Yes.
yeah. So I'm a
That'd
fan
be
of
cool.
Neil Gaiman. So I love
Oh, nice.
everything he does. I have like the full run for the Sandman series.
Really nice. Yeah, I love Neil Gaiman. He's probably my favorite author. That's what got me into comics as an older person, was reading Sandman, and then I read American Gods after that, and kind of picked up some of his other work and stuff. So
That's how
really
I turn people out to comics, man. They're like, oh, I want to read comics, whatever. I'm like, okay, well, I'll give you my first 4 volumes of Sandman. Just tell me how it is. And like, I give them the synopsis, and like, okay, I'll try it. It sounds interesting. And then they're like, yo, I just bought volume 6, 7, and 8 because I got to know what's happening. And I'm like, man, oh man. So, yeah. I mean, I like Neil Gaiman. I've seen a couple of his different series that he's done. Good Omens just started showing too, and I want to watch that as well.
Ooh, that's right. Forgot about that. No, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, he's definitely a really big inspiration. I mean, I love the way he handles mythology and myth and legend. It's really incredible.
Oh, an amazing writer, man. And I've seen some of his interviews and stuff like that, and just the way he thinks and the way he kind of sets that stuff up is just like, it's really awesome. And oh, man, like I love mythology. I love old stuff. I took Latin for all 4 years in high school. I did art history for 4 years of college or whatever. And I like old languages. I like old, mythology and folklore from all over the world. So the way he weaves that in and tells those stories, and he tells them in such a way where those characters, like, these eternal characters, feel so real. These instances they're so real, but they're also surreal. I don't know, it's wild. He's such a wild writer.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Yeah, it's definitely he's definitely one of my biggest inspirations, that's for sure. Now in the chat, Neostar Production asks, "Isn't the Anansi Boys currently a book?"
Yes, it is currently a book, and they're talking about doing a spinoff of it. So I mean, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, if I don't know how American Gods is doing optically. I don't know how many people are watching it or whatever. I know that I'm going to binge watch it. So you guys, just letting you guys know that I am going to binge watch it. Keep it up, and hopefully there's a 3rd season. But if it's doing well enough optically, then hopefully they'll get a nice little spinoff.
And some people say that book is better than the original novel.
I've heard. Yeah.
Now, also, I wanted to point out, Neostar Productions says where was that? Hey, Mike Toney, if you ever get the chance, I'd love to show you Henshin Hero Guarizer, I believe it is. It's a comic he's working on. It says if you the quality of manga with superheroes.
Yeah,
he's been developing it for a while.
Yeah, my handle is Mike Toney Design at Mike Toney Design. I answer all my DMs, so just DM me. You know, a link to your comic. I'll take a look at it. I mean, I probably should not be the one to like judge your comic, you know, but I'll tell you if I like it or not. You know what I mean? I don't give too much insight past that.
Hey, well, that's all. Even that is helpful, I think, for newer creators and things like that. It's any input is always good, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I love when people tell me about my stuff, whether it's good or bad. So, I gotta find the way to be able to reciprocate that. I feel like I'm still growing. I'm still very far along. I'm still very like short along in my art journey. So it's harder for me to want to give people advice on certain things. You know, it just makes me feel a little uncomfortable. But I totally recognize how it can be really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. Now, if you don't mind, I thought we could talk just for a little bit about the kind of the project that we kind of worked on together, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for those of you who don't know, I've been working on a light novel for a little while now. It's called Singularity Madness, and it's kind of like a near future science fiction novel, kind of like Black Mirror meets, I don't know, Ghost in the Shell, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough to work with Mike with him doing the art on the series, and the first book that we did. And so here I'll go ahead and pull up some of the stuff from your website. But it was really cool to work with you. Had you worked on any light novels or anything like that before?
Yeah, I mean, I've done some character designs for people,
Nice.
and you know, I really do enjoy that kind of work. I really do enjoy, you know, writers kind of being like, hey, I have this character, and you know, I really want to kind of develop. I want to have some visuals to go along with my novel and stuff like that, and then being able to kind of show that stuff, and yeah, it's enjoyable. It's good when I get clients like yourself who you know, like I work pretty quickly, you know, but you guys like also appreciate like the time and the work and the effort that goes into certain things, and you guys write things pretty clearly. Um, and then you allow for like me to experiment with certain things, and it's kind
Nice.
of like an artist's dream a little bit to be able to have, you know what I'm saying, like that level of like ownership to a degree, but also have the right level of detail that you know where you can't go off the rails and where you should kind of stay. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's hard.
Yeah.
You
No,
give
I totally get that.
it's great in.
I really appreciate that coming from the writer's perspective too, because what I love to see is because I come with that general idea of, here's kind of what I see and what I think needs to be there, and giving you that freedom, I think allows you that artistic expression to come out to its fullest degree. And I think I love seeing that moment of coming back and being like, wow, that's way better than anything I could have even imagined. I think that's an incredible moment. So I agree. I think that is a really cool way to work as an artist and a writer together.
Yeah, it was good. I don't necessarily get a lot of that. So
Nice.
it's rare that I get clients that are kind of like that. I have about 3. You're included in that, of ones that kind of do it that way and make it, you know, really enjoyable to kind of, you know, handle it that way. But yeah, too, and it's just you know, I had fun, you know, doing them and stuff like that. I felt like there were a couple times where, you know, I try to keep a set limit on how much I work, you know, especially when I do client work and stuff like that. And I found myself just like doing extra stuff on you guys stuff to just be like, oh, I really want to do this thing, or you know, I
Nice.
really want to have this swirl here. Let me just draw these pants over just so I can, you know, like this dude and get the wrinkle on the one leg. This is like, you know, like really get the force behind a lot of stuff. And
Nice.
so it's just kind of like, yeah, I found myself kind of enjoying messing around with a lot of like what you guys were doing. And, you know, I don't want to say too much about the story or backstory of stuff that you gave me, but, you know, drawing things in the past and then drawing things in the future and then drawing, you know, chase scenes and, you know, people together and stuff like that. That, you know, that long scene I did, which I didn't post, but it has all the characters laid out like that's really cool. You know what I mean?
Oh
like,
yeah.
have their kind of different personalities and doing different stuff and doing part of that background and this, you know, like finding a way, and color is my thing. So finding a way to all those colors match with the background and kind of foreground colors, and being like, you know, how I can make the contrast still be good and do the stuff. So it was enjoyable, man. Yeah, I'd say, yeah, I can
I'm
say
glad to
that.
hear that. Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear. Yeah, you nailed it. As far as I'm concerned, you know, every image you came back with, from the composition to the colors, it was just so dynamic. I loved every second of it, you know. So I couldn't be happier for my end.
I'm glad, man. It's always nerve wracking. You know, I deliver stuff to clients and I'm like, what if they just go, I fucking hate this. Give me my money back. You know what I mean? Like, that's my fear every time. Like, I could be delivering it to like a 14-year-old kid, or like when I delivered some stuff to this promo company that did something for Marvel. Like, it was for Black Panther. And I was just like, man, they're going to be like, this fucking sucks. And then just send it back to me, or just not, you know what I mean? And so I'm always in fear of that. Whenever I do something that I'm just going to deliver it, and they're just going to be like, yo, give me my money back now. Like, oh, man.
That just must be the eternal artist sphere right there, yeah.
It is. Even if I like it, I'm like, damn, I really like this. I hope they like it. And then like, it's always just a fresh air if they're just like, yo, this is crazy. I couldn't imagine it. Or like saying like, yo, you got exactly what I was thinking about. And it's great because it means we're on the same page. So if I'm still creating with them, right, then that means we're going to be creating on the same page. You know what I mean? And my nervousness can go down because we're thinking along the same lines, or I'm reading them, you know, which is good.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That sounds like it's a great way to work. Kind of a good relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it you know, it pans out sometimes. You know what I mean? Working with writers and doing these light novel things have been really great. I do have a nightmare group of clients, though. You know,
yeah, I was going to ask about that. Is there a certain group that's kind of more trouble in particular?
I will say this, and it's probably a lot of artists. Me and my artist friends talk about this all the time. Working with musicians is like quite possibly the fucking worst. And
really?
like, I mean, it's like, I mean, I've had like, you know, a couple of good ones, but for the most part, like you dread it when someone hits you and they're like, you know, a musician, they're like, hey, like, I really want you to do a cover for a thing. And you're like, oh man, because like, I've yet to find a creator that, like, an artist, a musician that wants to pay me at my price. Like, I have to like talk them through it. And then even if I'm like, okay, well, I can give you some sort of a deal, right? Like there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. You're going to be spending a certain amount of money. And they're like, great. And so I do the work for them, and then they want mad extra stuff. And you're like, you're not even paying me at the rate that I should be getting paid. And you're toppling onto some stuff. And that generally happens every time in that realm. And that's hard as a creator because, you know, the time we spend to make things, you know, as an artist, you know, that's kind of our money. And so, yeah, musicians are generally the hardest. Or one guy who had like 10 bands in a photo, which is like $10,000, like 10 racks, right?
10. Sorry, say 10. Say what now?
10.
They
say like 10 bands, like 10 racks, like $10,000, right?
Jeez.
And like, you know, like he's just like messing around with money or whatever, taking pictures, like, hey, yeah, whatever. And I'm like, cool. All right, so the cover's gonna cost you like 300 or something like that. He's like, oh man, that was like more expensive than I thought. I'm like, yo, you have 10 racks. You can't give me 3 bills, like 3 singular bills out of your 30 bills or something like that, or 300 bills or whatever it is. You can't give me 3 of them to do the artwork that you're going to use to make more money.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh man, come on. Like, I don't think people understand how much artwork and creativity and design adds to people's bottom lines now, especially in this day and age. Like, the paradigm has shifted to a degree where a lot of things, like, we've hit the top level of certain things. Like, there's only so much storage right now that you can get. There's only so fast your internet can get. There's only, like, you're getting to that point where you're hitting like a limit until the paradigm shifts again. So now what separates you from the next brand? What separates you from the next company? What separates? It's your optics, it's your visuals. You know, what do your visuals say about the product that you're trying to sell or make? And people don't realize when you shortchange your artist or you shortchange your creator, they shortchange your work. you're not going to get the best unless they've given you that deal. You know, like people who come to me and they do a certain amount of characters, I always give them a deal because based on economies of scale and how much, you know, money is coming in like off the front. It alleviates a lot of financial burden on me. So then it allows me to work at the same rate. So I can work at the same high level if I've given you a discount on the majority of your work because, you know, so much of it's coming in initially. But if you're like haggling an artist down and his price is $150 and he's doing something for you for $100 or $75, don't expect $150 worth of work.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. It's so important to pay your artists what they're worth. It's they're putting in the time, the effort, you know, to do it. You need to pay them adequate amount. Otherwise, like you said, you're not going to be getting their full ability. It just can't happen that way, you know.
Well, even if you were thinking of self-preservation, right? You know, if someone was going to do heart surgery on you, you're not going to skimp them. You're not
Right.
going to skimp somebody. And if this is the thing you love and you put your heart into it, your writing or your story or your music, you want to put your best foot forward as the best you can. You know what I'm saying? And work with the best you can. Like a lot of times I'll say, well, what's your budget? Oh, my budget is this. Well, this is what I can do for you for that. And you will get the best of that for that particular price, which works better for you than trying to overextend it and thin it out because then you make it cheaper. And so even out of self-preservation for anybody who's listening, who's a writer or creator to some degree, pay the people who do the artwork and creative stuff for you correctly because then they will do it correctly for you and it adds to your bottom line, even if for self-preservation purposes, you know. And then if you want to be humane, these people put the time and effort to learn what they learn and to do this work for you. And so, you know, it's just valuing their work as well.
Yeah, I agree, and it's you know, what I think also once you've established that good, you know, kind of a working relationship, it's better going forward. You have more trust between you and the artist if you end up working together on future projects or further issues down the line.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. People who've skimped me or done certain things, like, you know, I get a long commission list that comes in and it's like a lot of people are coming in. I tend to get back to them later, you know, or I tend to be like, you know, I'm backed up, you know, whereas like someone who I worked with and had a good relationship with and they paid me, you know, like close to my price, or they, you know, they did a bigger project with me and then they just, they did a bigger project with me and they, you know, need something that's a little bit smaller second time around. I'm like, we have a great working relationship. Let's do this. You know, I'll
Nice.
bump them ahead of certain people just so I can, you know, get to working on something that I enjoy and working with them. So
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. So you've had some good repeat clients, Ian?
yeah, there's a couple clients I really like working with that come back
Nice.
every year that have done a couple books.
Oh,
Void
wow.
Beast.
That's cool.
So Matt Jones, he's done, I want to say 3 chapters of Void Beast, and now he's doing like a comic too. And I love working on his stuff. I designed his original characters for the first 3 of his things, and I did his first 3 covers, and that was really good. I've also done this books for this dude who does Nomid. His name's that's Tim or Timothy. I can't remember his last name, but his series is called Nomid, and so I've done covers for 2 of his books and the character designs for both of those books as well. And I love working with them. You know, like they have the same kind of vibe like that you guys have, where they give me a good detail of the characters. And like the thing I really like about working with Tim is that like a lot of the times if I'm doing just straight character designs, depending on who I'm working with, I like to deliver an extra sketch of like a complete different direction that I've picked.
Really?
So like I've read their character bio, I've thought about what that character carries in their pockets, and I'm like, this person carries this, he has this, this is how he would dress. And I would deliver him 2 sketches, the one that he asked for, the one that he like gave a description of, and the one that I thought of based off of the character's personality. And there are times where he's like, man, the one you did is better. Like it just fits his personality more. And I can appreciate a creator who can see like the value of not just what they want to see, but like what actually works for their storytelling and stuff like that. But they're also allowing me to flex that a little bit makes me do extra work for him to get the best characters I can get. And so some of my higher level of likes for those years that I've done those books have been for those characters. And that's because, we've worked on them collaboratively. So.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool that you have those kind of clients that you can come back to again and again and work on those fun projects.
Very blessed to be able to work with those people, man. Definitely.
Now, I brought up a couple things I wanted to share real quick here on the screen share. I brought up Void Beast. So this is the one that you worked on, is that right?
Yep, that was the first cover I did for him.
Nice. Very cool.
I think this was like a first book thing that I'd ever done. I also did that logo too.
Oh, nice.
Just to kind of do, and I wanted like a void, a dark, thick, bold kind of a font that like felt thick and it felt like a void, and then obviously this kind of very beast manual kind of, lettering with that. But I think this was like one of the first covers that I did, and I was like shitting bricks like while I was like drawing. I don't know if he's gonna
really
like it. This is gonna be crazy. I don't know. Like this is gonna be this guy's real book. And when I finished it, I was like, wow, I really like this. And then he saw it and he was like, wow, I really like this. And then he came back to get his other 2 novellas done. So I did Void Beast, this one and 3. So volume 2 and 3. And I enjoyed, working on Matt's stuff. So Matt Jones, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I like seeing that the cover that you did there. It's interesting to see that as your first one. Now, I wanted to bring up your Instagram again here because I got a character pulled up. I believe this is a particular favorite of yours. Is that right?
Yeah, I like it.
Nice. Can you tell us a little bit about this character?
So yeah, it was I like this started off as kind of like a fan art thing that I was gonna do for like a Ghost Rider kind of thing. And like I'd seen Jaime Reyes like the Ghost Rider, and I was just kind of like, man, I want to do a cool fan art for this or whatever. And I was like, but like as far as the rules for myself go as a creator, which helps brand myself, it's like I do people of color. How can I bring that in? So I was just like, man, I want to, how am I going to bring this in? And I just was like, well, maybe I can't do it. But I just started drawing it because I was practicing skeletal anatomy anyway. And this idea came to me of like having this dude who has this like explosive kind of fire, which mimics an afro. And that would kind of be, closer kind of to that. And because it like, is this explosion, that like his skeleton is covered in soot, so it's kind of like the soot blowback, and that's how you get kind of like this black version of the character. The name Digetta is like this, it comes from this African tale from this griot who was one of the king's names was Digetta, and I really like that name, for a character, so I just named him Digetta. And he's a little bit of he's wearing Balenciagas. Because I used to
nice.
And I'm into kind of fashion and clothing and stuff like that. So
you said you owned a pair?
I owned a clothing company. I didn't own a pair of Balenciagas.
Oh, I was gonna say okay.
I don't have that type of money yet.
Yeah. Hey man, I feel it. I wish I could get a pair of those myself. So,
but no. One of these scripts, catches on.
Right. I mean? But no, that's cool. I think that's interesting to hear that you hear you talk about how you own a clothing company, because I totally see your design, your fashion sense coming through in your art. Like the way you do your shoes is incredible. Like I haven't really seen too many artists put so much detail in the shoe, but I really think it looks cool, and it just adds so much more elements that you don't necessarily see. Like, so I do appreciate that kind of fashion sense that you're coming from.
It's funny. Is a lot of I've gotten a lot of people that say like, I get that you did clothing. And so like one guy actually hit me up, and he didn't ask me for character designs. He was like, hey, I want you to dress my characters. Like I want you to redesign what they're wearing. He's like, really? I love the clothes that you make for your characters and everything else like that. And he's like, I like the way the characters are established. I just, I want to change their wardrobe and stuff like that. I had another guy want to commission me to just design clothes. Like he was like, hey, like, can you design a couple fits for me? And I was like, man, that sounds awesome. So there are people that do reach out to me who didn't know I had owned a clothing company before and kind of doing that stuff. And the company got to the point where we were doing ready wear cut and sew stuff. So I was getting into doing tech packs and, you know, creating different cuts and fits and mixing material and going out and researching a lot of that stuff. So I definitely implement a lot of that into, you know, what I do as a creator.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's so cool to hear that.
Thank you.
And I just think it's really cool to see. I always love watching you post new pictures because I think as kind of like what we're talking about the manga, your influence or your style, kind of it's cool to see your style develop over time.
You know what? It's funny. I tell people all the time, like, I do draw for fun because I enjoy it, but realistically, every time I put pen to paper, it's to get better. So like I'm always practicing something new. I'm always doing something different. Like I'm chasing a lot of people who literally, you know, my good friend Cameron, like he quit his job to do art full time.
Wow.
You know, I consider him like one of like my rivals. And so now he literally draws all day. How can I keep
Nice.
that? Well, I have to be very conscious about drawing all the time and getting better and not just being like, oh, I want to do a doodle, but like I'm going to do a doodle of a bunch of thighs because I'm not good at drawing thighs. I'm going to do a bunch of doodles of pelvic bones because I'm not good at doing pelvic bones. Is it exciting? No. I have a sketchbook of just, I was thinking about doing a tour of my sketchbook, but it just has a ton of stuff in it. That's just like me doing doodles of like actual practice stuff, you know? So I'm constantly thinking about getting better when I'm drawing, not always just the character design and stuff like that. And most of the things I post are things that have started from practice.
No, that's so smart. It's kind of like it kind of makes me think of maybe part of why you connect so much with certain animes like Naruto, for example, with that you know mentality of always trying to get better. You know.
Absolutely.
Not only that, I mean, you're just the way you stylize them is very Naruto-esque. It has that clean, crisp look of like each person feels and looks as if that's exactly what they would choose to wear. A lot of your drawings feel the same way, and I mean, a lot of artists wish that they could have that. I mean, me personally, I do.
I mean, I do think about how my characters want to think about stuff. You know, like I think about like, you know what I think? I do that because I think it makes it easier. I do it because I think it makes the design easier when I have a character who's like, before he leaves the house, he's going to wear this or why he wears the things he wears. Like when I do Iku the Keeper, all the different families, they have different articles of clothing that they wear when they're basically when they're gonna do work, when they're gonna suit up and stuff. And so, you know, like that stuff is important. So like I have a group that's in Iku the Keeper, right? And they're called the Black Bloods. And so they deal in assassinations and stuff like that, right? In the area that they control. And that's how they make their money. And so I was like, man, you know, you think of assassins, you think of ninjas and everything else, they're very dark and clandestine and whatever. I was like, but you know, they deal in they deal in certain poisons. They have, you know, some of the different members deal in different kinds of poisons or whatever. And those who are anointed with the black blood, which is like a, you know, like a almost like it's like the black mamba of poisons and killing or whatever, you know, some of those have them. And so I'm like, instead of my characters being dressed in all black and being clandestine, I'm going to do like high levels of color because in nature, animals who are neon colored and bright colored tend to be poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that would be a great feature to have for their family is when they show up to their meetings or their whatever, and they're, you know, wearing the Omen Hene mask and their group's wearing their mask, it's all bright kind of colored and neon colored, and you know they're dangerous, which is you know, it's a flip on the turn of how you see kind of a clandestine kind of killing kind of group, you know. This is kind of like this is like Iku's crew. This is like their little hangout. The
Iku's crew. Okay, so this is not the ones you were talking about then.
No. If you scroll down, you'll see a dude in a red suit, and he has like a yellow kind of pattern on his suit, and his name is Eni, and he's Eni of the Black Blood, and he's like a lieutenant of like that Black Blood kind of crew. And
we said a red suit.
You have to scroll down a bit.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so I haven't done them recently. I might have done them for like a Throwback Thursday or something, but you'll see him. He's like in a red suit, a blue background, but but then it was like, okay, what's the style of clothing they wear? And I'm like, well, some of the people wear Western suits, and some of them have African suits, and some of them are in agbadas. Like, there are different things that I can pile into that. And like Iku, because he's younger and his gang is younger, a lot of their clothes are influenced by Western clothing. So that's why they're wearing like bomber jackets and joggers and whatever. The same way, like if you go to Japan and you see the youth in Japan, they're influenced, by Western culture and style, and it's the same thing. So it's the mix of the, from the African culture to the Western culture that they've seen, visually and stuff like that. So I constantly think about those things and bringing those into the mindset of my characters.
I think I found him. Let's see. I
I mean,
believe
that's pretty smart, the way to actually think about and how nature would you could
No, he's further down than that.
Damn it.
visually represent a lot of these.
Um,
But I mean, to actually kind of think about that and more place it into their actual culture, what you're doing at the same time is not only just trying to make these characters distinct or like their own, but you're actually like overall building that world itself. So that this way, when people jump in, it's not like they're surprised by certain things. It just feels more natural in a sense, and that's always perfect.
yeah, it's world building and stuff like that. But like I'm explaining that to you, right? That's something I'll probably never explain in the story. It'll just
really?
be someone who's someone who's like reading it and kind of gets it and goes, "Oh, I see. Like they're younger. They're like the youth, so they dress more youthfully. They're more influenced by Western culture." Like I would never necessarily write that out per se, but you would kind of see that. So like I'm a type of person, especially if I'm doing a visual comic. I'm definitely like a show don't tell kind of individual. You know what I mean? Or at least I try to be. And so that's the character right there.
Yes.
Finally. You scroll down.
That's trolled a lot, right? But no, I think some of this early Iku art was another thing that really caught my eye, because I've been really interested in the plot of Iku since I read that little synopsis. So you were talking about this character. These are the guys this is from a rival group.
Yeah, this is from one of the families. So this is one of the lieutenants. He's not the main guy, but he's one of the dudes that you'll come in contact with, and you see his blade has like a vial at the end of it that has liquid in it, and so it's kind of a little bit of his labeling, like he has the black blood in his vial. You'll see other people with different kind of weapons in the vial. The vial color is different.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so and people, they work in their own type of poisons, or they use their own type of poisons in their own ways. So, but you see this character Annie, you don't see his face, but this bright red suit with this yellow kind of lines, you got the yellow kind of flowers on there with the that high saturation of blue, and the contrast against that background. So a lot of those characters like that. This was like the second character that was made for Iku the Keeper. So Iku, the first ever drawing of him is like just below that, and the spear is in the ground.
Yeah,
And
one more over.
You might have to close this, and then if
I
you
see him.
go down to the
There he
left,
is.
so yeah, that was the second drawing, and the first one was him in like the bush, and I was like, man, I really like this character. I really like this kind of dark skinned character. I gave him the scarification, which I want to carry it throughout his character, and I was like, the more I looked at him, I was like, what does he do? Like he looks like a little bit of a badass. He comes from a certain area. Could he be a leader of a group? Could he, whatever? And it kind of just, spiraled into that.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome, and that's gonna be a really exciting one to see come forward. I know I'm really looking forward to that story. And do you have a plans on where you think you'll be releasing it? So people, or are you still kind of thinking all that out?
The funny thing is,
where will be people able to find it when you
I
find
wanted it in July, and when I first release it, it'll definitely be free, and it'll be on Tapastic.
Nice.
I don't like doing like a page at a time. So if I drop it, it'll be like 10 to 12 pages.
Okay.
Maybe even 16 pages, like a regular kind of manga that comes out. Yeah, and I want to take my time with this one. I want to take my time with the world building of it and stuff like that. So there's a lot of aspects to it. There's a lot of plots and subplots that I think are really important to the development of each of the characters in the story.
Very cool. Yeah, no, that's like I said, that is I'm a huge fan of your work, and this is definitely one of the ones I'm looking forward to the most. Real quick, as we're wrapping up here, I want to just get in one more quick question from the audience. Let's see. Neostar Productions says, Mike Toney, what do you think of the character and clothing designs of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures?
Love it.
Nice.
I mean, I love it. I love it because it's so out there. I love it because it's so distinct and so bright. I love the dude's art style. Originally, when I saw it, I was like, man, what is this? And I couldn't get behind it right away. And I was like, I got to watch this thing because people love JoJo. And I'm like, it's the same thing that got me into hiking. I'm like, people like it. They like it for a reason. I got to watch it. And as I started watching it, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. It's generational. It's this and that. And then as the generations go through the distinct levels of clothing design, I was like, I like the fact that this author and writer is an artist is very different. He's a very different way of looking at that stuff. So I love it.
No, that's really cool. Yeah, it is definitely.
You can't tell if his hat is fully his hat or his hair.
Yeah,
you know, that's like great. You know what I mean?
It's so awesome. Yeah, it's like you would never see that from anyone but him. I feel like, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
That's such a unique JoJo style, which is definitely has that great visual style to it. So I just want to say, is there anything you'd like to say to your fans out there or to people who are learning about your work now?
I mean, just stick around, follow me. I appreciate every person that follows me. I appreciate every person that is a part of that because you help me grow, you keep me kind of drawing to get better. And I want to just tell good stories, So, and then for anybody else who just found out about me, even though I draw people of color, the anime is for everybody. The same way like Dragon Ball Z, or Dragon Ball, Yu Yu Hakusho, Naruto, all the big three, any of these sub animes and mangas are for everybody. My artwork is for everybody too. And I think that if you looked at my art like that, that you would also learn some things the same way you've learned things from anime.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a really cool message. Now, where can people follow you online so they can keep track of all your art and what you got going on?
So my Twitter handle is Mike Toney Design. My Instagram handle is Mike Toney Design, and my Facebook is It's Mike Toney. And so yeah, you can follow me on those 3 different formats. I'm mostly active on Instagram. I answer my DMs, and I'm open for commissions if people are interested.
Nice, man. Well, that's awesome. And you said you're also on Facebook as well, is that right?
Yep, Facebook page is It's Mike Toney.
It's Mike Toney. I'll put that in the chat as well. And thanks again. I really appreciate you joining us today and taking time to talk with us. I know you got I'm sure you got a busy schedule right now with all your art and stuff.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you. I always love doing stuff like this and being able to, talk about my artwork and connect with other creators.
Well, that's awesome, man. And maybe we'll be able to have you on in the future as well.
That would be awesome. I'd love to do it again, guys.
Awesome.
That was a great one.
Awesome, man. Well, you have a great night. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who watched. And be sure to follow the stuff and check out EQ the Keeper once it comes out. It's just going to be awesome. I know, guys. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.